Part two, when we are continuing on with our conversation. These are 11 filters for making good decisions. And it was interesting. I was telling you when just before that Allison and I toured like a micro school that we're considering sending Calvin to this morning. And one of the things that they focus on that's appealing to us is they focus on obviously independent learning, child-led learning, which some people agree with, some people don't. I'm not sure whether I agree with it. But more than anything else, they focus a lot on resourcefulness and decision-making. And I like that because to me, those are skills that are going to become more valuable as technology continues to impact our lives. And things like rote memorization, multiplication tables, the same curriculum for everybody, that type of thing. Basically anything having to do with information that you can quickly Google or ChatGPT or whatever you're using for your search, ask Siri, whatever, are going to become less valuable, right? It's the ability to ask a good question and the ability to figure out, and this is what we spoke about in part one, which if you haven't listened to part one of this 2-part series, you don't need, like, what we're talking about is not in order necessarily, so you don't need to go back and listen to it right away. But I do recommend that you go and listen to it once you're done listening to this, because we give some background into rational decision making and how the brain works and how valuable it is that the brain largely works on emotional, very quick decisions with very little thought, and how important that is. But part of becoming really successful is figuring out how to at least slow down your natural impulses and figure out really quickly when it makes sense to put more energy into a decision or not. So we get deeper into that. I won't dive into it, but when you and I talked a lot about that in the last episode, I was going to say yesterday, but these episodes air 2 days apart. We recorded it yesterday, but you're hearing this a few weeks later. Hello there, future.
Don't confuse me with your time constraints, Sean. Just move it along, please. Thank you.
So we're on number 5 right now. So number 5 is, does this have, and so these are all questions, right, that I ask myself, filters that I ask myself based off of stuff I take in to be able to make a better decision. So number 5, does this have the potential to have a disproportionately positive result for the time and or money invested? Okay. This is something called positive asymmetry. I'm going to give a shout out before we get into this topic because I think that this is probably the most valuable one. I'm going to give a shout out to Nassim Taleb's book. If you have not yet read The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, 2 of his books, they're at the top of my recommended reading list. And the reason is, nobody has any idea what the future is going to hold. Anybody who says that they can predict the future are either disillusioned or lying. And I think that it is very valuable to become comfortable having no idea what's going to happen in the future and build your marketing and business processes all around that idea. So every action that you take then needs to have risk minimized and gain maximized. One of the things that Nassim Taleb said is that we humans fool ourselves by constructing flimsy accounts of the past and believing that they're true. And I've got a couple quotes on this because I think it's a really important point, that it's really easy to predict things after they've happened, and that in hindsight, everything seems obvious. Arthur Conan Doyle, in the Sherlock Holmes book, The Problem of Thorbridge, said, "It is easy to be wise after the event." Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, said, "We understand life backwards, but we live it forwards." The truth of the matter is, the human brain isn't equipped to comprehend our modern world's complexity. So in an attempt to make sense of it all, we smooth out the edges of life and create patterns when they don't exist. The key in understanding that basic principle, because I'm not just going to be like, you can't predict the future, so just like, I don't know, fuck anybody and take drugs because it doesn't matter. Like, it's, that's not the point that I'm making here.
Roll the dice, son.
Yeah. This one time on an airplane, turbulence hit. And the pilot said, we're going down. And everybody, what was that? Was that the movie Mallrats? You remember that?
I think it was either like Mallrats or Mean Girls or somewhere in that genre.
Jay and Silent Bob, it was one of those where they just talk about how just everybody just starts having sex like mad on the plane, and then the plane stabilizes, and nobody spoke about it again.
Somewhere in that mid-90s, early 2000s raunchy comedy era. But it's a good skit though. It's good writing. It's clever writing.
So it's not what I'm saying that you should be doing.
We're not suggesting that you tug on your airline partner's genitals in any way.
Yeah, sorry, we're not suggesting that you go cross-country skiing if you're in the middle seat. You know what I'm saying? And so, Amber, if you're listening to this because you're reviewing it afterwards, I'm sorry, and please don't leave us alone again.
This is partly on you, Amber. Deal with
this it. This is not just partly on you. This is entirely your fault. Where I think...
I'm sorry, you're saying? I've got distracted now.
Where I think that it becomes really important to just understand that concept, and then everything that you decide to do, build it out with something called positive asymmetry in mind. Basically, if you can lose 100 times with an idea, but win once, and that single win offsets all of the combined losses, then the risk is worth taking. Because nothing's for certain, and everything is a risk. Now, this idea is very powerful. I talk about in the book, in the Obvious Choice book, I talk about stats a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's not a data analysis book, but I talk about stats because my point throughout the whole book is that you can make a really good decision, and a really good decision of something to do is going to give you about a 7 out of 10 hit rate. I mean, 70% of the time, it's going to work out well for you, right? Mm-hmm. What that also means is that 30% of the time, it's going to fail. And that does not mean that on your 7th effort, it's going to work. It might mean on your first time, because the odds largely reset each time. Now, not completely. You might build up a little bit of momentum and audience following, community knowledge, whatever. It doesn't exactly reset. It's not a roulette wheel, but they mostly do. And so it might take a long time. I mean, there's a lot of luck involved. It might take a long time for the odds to work out in your favor each time, even if the odds are in your favor. The key then, if you want to reliably guarantee success in something, basically, is to keep being able to show up. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I think of positive asymmetry is, okay, well, let's consider the worst case scenario of this thing. Is it really so bad? And I'm going to give you a couple examples of positive asymmetry. Right? Is it really so bad? And how I define really so bad means that it will hurt or impair or stop any ability to show up again if this doesn't work. I do not believe in the philosophy of burn the boats. Mm-hmm. You know, the famous story with the invasion of Troy.
Yeah.
Where they were outnumbered, and so the military commander burnt all the boats behind them, and so the people couldn't go back, and so they had to fight forward, and they won. Great story. I don't buy into it as a philosophy to follow. And so think about whenever you're doing this, and you can look up positive asymmetry. I do recommend these books by Nassim Taleb. But basically what you're looking for are opportunities that have more potential upside than downside, because you're always going to win by taking a lot of shots. And so what's a couple of these opportunities? One of them is as simple as saying hello to a stranger.
Right.
Honestly, it's what's the worst that can happen? The person kind of ignores you. person flips you off. Like, so what? You'll go on in your day. There's really basically no downside. I don't know. They could be pretty. Like, maybe something like that'll happen. Or maybe, like, when Allison wanted to learn more about real estate, anybody she met that knew somebody or whatever that was interested in real estate, she went for coffee with them. She chatted with them on the phone.
Right.
To me, that's positive asymmetry, because eventually she was able to find the person that she made a JV relationship with, and now we have 4 rental properties and 13 units, all with this person managing it, and it's largely worked out well. So saying hello to a stranger, sharing your idea as much as you can possibly share it with as many people as you can share it with. A lot of people like to hide their ideas, their great ideas, until they're ready to go because they think somebody's going to steal it. Ain't nobody going to steal it.
Right.
It's execution that matters. When you share your idea, people will want to help or might know somebody to help. Quick Coach, the software that we built, is a fantastic example of that. You know how I met Ray, our developer, who was phenomenal? For 3 years, I told every single person I met about this idea of software that I wanted to build. And then one day I happened to be a guest on Eric Malzone's podcast, and I was talking about the software that I wanted to build. I had probably spoken to 100 people about it already. And Eric sent me an introduction to Ray afterwards and said, I think I found your guy. That's asymmetry.
This shows up a lot in coaching coaches,
yep.
particularly for business. I immediately think about the DM, and I immediately, having that conversation, opening those conversations, talking to people. And I almost simultaneously think about the unnecessary concern of the new online trainer that if they post on social media, they're somehow going to blow up their life, annoy all their friends until they're left penniless and alone. When really the downside is people ignore your post. The upside is you build an incredible business doing something you love doing for the rest of your life.
You might feel kind of silly one day for a few minutes about something that you're going to forget about whenever your wife comes home.
Right.
I mean, it's just I've got a few more that are super simple. And I mean there's lots on like bigger scales, like saving 10% of your income and investing it, for example. But these are ones that I think are more just more catered towards the people who are probably listening. So another one is tell somebody that you admire their work. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter if you think that they're this big shot, big deal. Tell them that you admire their work. I did that the other day. Jason Pfeiffer, who is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. So he's the editor-in-chief of one of the biggest magazines in the world. Writes a phenomenal newsletter. And I recommend you subscribe to it, jasonpfeiffer.com. But he sent an email, and it was just really well done. Like, it was just a really well done email. And I just responded back, and I basically said that. I was like, dude, this was really, really well done. Thank you so much for writing it. And he responded back, super appreciative, and we sent 1 or 2 emails back and forth, and that was it. Like, there's no downside. I've done that with Seth Godin before. I do that with people that I admire. Just if they do something good, there's a line. I think this is a Phil Caravaggio line. He said, "Try to catch people in the act of doing something good." It's so easy to look at people who are making mistakes. Now, try to catch somebody in the act of doing something good. I got you. I got you. I saw you did that thing. I saw you did that thing. I just want to tell you how good that was because I caught you. I caught you doing something good.
You son of a bitch. That was awesome.
Son of a bitch.
Good job,
Another
buddy.
asymmetry, positive asymmetry effort is creating content without the pressure that it has to generate you business.
Sweet Jesus, yes.
So
Gosh.
I think showing honestly what you know in a way that is true to you is one of the largest ways to leverage positive asymmetry, but you can't expect it or need it to generate you business today.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even think about it that way. And if you're unable to do that, don't even think about creating content.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the final one that I have is learning crossover skills. We talk about these time and time again, and I gotta think of a good name for them one of these goddamn days because I keep talking about them with different names, and I don't know why I haven't done this. It's such an easy thing to do. I've just been lazy, and this idea of whatever is that you specialize in, your area of expertise is inherently unvaluable. Mm-hmm. Whatever you know related to your industry that you learned from a book is worth diddly squat. What is valuable is the interplay between your industry knowledge and other skills and experiences that you have in your life. And there's sliding scales of how valuable those interplays can be. Mm-hmm. But there are a few what I consider really important, really valuable crossover skills that it is worth gaining a good enough knowledge and skill set in them, because no matter what you do in the future, these things are going to benefit you. The reason why I'm confident in business and able to do what I'm doing is not because of anything I produced or any assets, is because I've taken the time to learn these skills, and I'm fairly confident that I could enter just about any industry, spend 6 months learning just enough about that industry, connect it with all my other skills that I'm going to tell you about, and make a good living in that field. When you have that and you're confident in that, God, you can show up different. Mm-hmm. And so to me, learning these skills is positive asymmetry. So writing is number one. If you can write, you can communicate well. Great writers are often great speakers because they think about how to communicate ideas in a way that somebody else understands them. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to write something for somebody you've never met, trying to communicate an idea in your head that you understand one way, and now you have to think about a way to communicate that idea for other people who are coming at it from a totally different angle. Mm-hmm. God, that's hard. But it makes you understand that concept much, much better. And so much of our communication these days is written communication, emails, text messages, DMs, even scripts for videos. It's writing. It's right. Storytelling, which is writing, right? So writing. Wealth generation, how money works. God, just learn how money works. Learn how debt works. Learn how money works. Learn how investing and compound interest works. If you understand that, I mean, I can't balance a P&L statement. Probably should be able to. I understand what it is, though, and I can speak to my accountants and understand what they're telling me. Read a couple books on finance. Like wealth generation for sure. And then the final one that I have down here is just behavioral psych. Learn how humans operate. Mm-hmm. Because there's way too much attention, in my opinion, which is the right opinion, I'm confident in saying. And a lot of times I'm like, this is my opinion. I'm not sure if it's right for everybody, but it's my opinion. Here, I'm like, no, this is the right opinion. Technology is always going to change. Algorithms are going to change. The buttons we push are going to change. There's going to be more automation. There's going to be more tools. The humans who use those tools, the way that we operate, the way our brains have evolved, the way our emotional and hormonal systems operate, will not change. So if you always want to be ahead and you always want to understand what's really important about tools and social media and technology and automation, learn how the human operates. Don't learn about the technology. Anything to add in asymmetry, because I knew that we dwell on that one, but we got 5 more of them.
Just the last point that you made, and I'll be quick because I had this conversation with one of our students in the Online Trainer Academy. I coach students for their business, and I had this conversation as he was found himself struggling through social media, and he's just starting out. probably less than 600 followers total, which is a lot of people, by the way. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
But in any case, just having a discussion about the algorithms, his understanding of it, my understanding of it. And he asked me a question at the end of our short discussion. He said, well, how do you get around this stuff? And I said, relationships. That's it. That's how you get it. Fuck the algorithm. You get around it by interacting with the other human in a way that they feel seen, heard, valid, and informed. And that gets you around all the bull crap that we just talked about just now. Okay. And I lean heavy into that.
I'll give you an example of it. Correct.
So,
let me give you an example of it.
For example, I started online training before I ever met Jonathan. By the time I got into OTA, I had a pretty decent following on social media that was mobilized. I could mobilize them. And the reason I could mobilize them is because I would go to their posts and congratulate them. I would share things that they said. I would speak about their accomplishments, their accolades. If they asked me questions that most people wouldn't answer, I would not only give a great answer, I would send a video answer to them. Just taking the time to respect and interact with a real person allows them to gravitate towards you regardless of what the system of communication requires. I want to operate around that. They'll find people that you have good relationships with, they'll find a way to communicate with you and receive your communication.
Here's what frustrates me about social media experts. They focus on the minutia, they focus on the superficial, they focus on the tactics that you can see. Let me give you the two things that I did, the two conversations that I had right before we popped on here. Okay. I went through reshares. So I went through people who shared a piece of content of mine. And I looked at people who weren't following me that shared a piece of content. And the first one is the Coalface Gym, Newcastle West Functional Training for All. Shared a post of mine. So I say, thanks for sharing. Also, I'm curious. It looks like you aren't yet following me on this page. So how'd you come across this post? This post? They said at this point, like, I don't know who it is. Like it's a gym's account, right? Said one of my coaches sent it to me. I thought it was great, so I had to share. I said, "Oh wow, that's so cool! I'm so happy you found it in my page. Who's your coach? I'd love to send them a message to say thanks." So they send me the Instagram of the coach that sent it. Now, normally I would go into that coach who is probably following me, and I'd send them a message, just be like, "Hey, like so cool! Thank you so much for doing this." At this point, I couldn't because they had a private page, so I couldn't message them.
Right.
But I messaged back. I'm like, too bad their account's private, so I can't message. Well, will you please tell her that I say thanks? Can do. Cheers. It's like, hey, mind sharing your name before I pop off to record a podcast episode? It's nice to know who I'm quote unquote speaking with. And they said, Sam. And then I just recorded a quick video. It was just like, hey, what's up, Sam? Yeah, great talking. Look, can't wait to chat more. I got to pop off for a podcast, but message anytime.
Boom.
They now followed me. Right? There was another one.
And as you look, I want to interject. They followed you, but they're a real follower. That's a following through engagement, not a following because you said, hey, follow me. And there's a different level of control of mobilizing those types of people who follow you on because there has been an engagement of some kind. Wildly different.
There was another one. I'm trying to find it here. There's like a gazillion messages and DMs that.
And the reason that I say that's
wildly I want to give you one more example.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is always forward, and then there's a bunch of Hebrew writing, and the name is Gilad_Armon. I don't know I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but it's an Israeli trainer. And so same type of thing. Thanks for sharing. Also, I'm curious. It looks like said, hey, a friend shared it and tagged it. I'm like, oh, it's fantastic. Happy you found it on my page. And I said, are you in Israel? Obviously they are. But I knew at that point that there was at least something in common with them, right? They're Israeli, I'm Jewish. Like, not a big connection.
Right.
But
enough.
Are you in Israel? You say, I am. I was like, oh, cool. Well, great to meet you. I'm Jewish. I live in Canada, but I've spent a lot of time in Israel. It's such a beautiful country. Oh, sweet. Good to meet you too. Maybe next time you visit Israel, we could meet. Like, that'd be so much fun. Until then, chat anytime, man. Like, it is like if you think you don't have time to do this, this is more important.
Yes.
You talk about positive asymmetry. This is more important than all of the stuff that I see people talking about of how to better craft your reels or whatever.
100%.
This is so much more important than that. Okay. Anything else to add? Can we move on? Okay. Number 6. And I knew that one would take a long time because that one's so important. Number 6. Have I considered what the other person really desires? Super, super simple filter. Whenever you're having a conversation with somebody, whenever you're selling anything, whenever you're in a negotiation specifically, even in a relationship, this isn't just business.
Mm-hmm.
Have you taken a step back and thought, what does the other person really want? There's a famous Jim Rohn saying, the business guru guy, and he said, in order to get what you want, help others get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So what people will say they want also is often quite different from what they really need. And your line of questioning, if you have that opportunity, asking why multiple times, is very useful to post through that to be able to connect what you do to what they really want. Because what you do only matters in as much as it relates to what they really want. Holy shit, look what I just saw here. So I'm reading from one of my books as I'm going through this. Mm-hmm. And the final line of this, so when did I write this book? I don't even know. Oh, this is hilarious, dude. I wrote this book in 2017. You know what the final line of the section is?
No.
From there, you become the obvious choice. No shit. It's right here in this book.
Dude, that's a sign.
Amazing. That's amazing. Oh, that's my awesome. God. Oh, my God. That just blew my goddamn mind.
Jonathan Goodman, prophet.
Holy crap.
The prophecy has been completed. I watch too much sci-fi. Don't shoot me.
Yo, that's messed up.
That's awesome. Hey, man, I believe the universe leaves you little breadcrumbs here and there, man. That's a breadcrumb. You're on the right path, sir.
That was right cool. Path. That was super awesome. Cool what just happened. Yeah. You and I just shared a moment, dear listener.
Amber wasn't here, so she
gets nothing.
Too bad, Amber.
Too bad, Amber.
Man, maybe she was blocking the connection the whole time.
Hope you're enjoying your time off.
We had a moment.
I just want you to know that as your boss, I never agreed to that. And there's no HR department to complain to. Okay, number 7.
Sweet Jesus.
Number 7.
What am I doing here?
I don't know. I ask myself that every day. Number 7. Will this truly impact my business, personal life, or society?
Oh, God.
So I think about this one mostly when it comes to like public speaking gigs. Was when this one became really important to me, because I realized very quickly that most speaking gigs, even if they're willing to pay thousands of dollars, just aren't worth the time. Because if you're at the point where people are willing to pay you that much to speak, then the money won't impact your business or you in any measurable way. Like, nobody's going to pay you that much if you really need that money. Right? That's kind of the... It's kind of the catch-22 of the thing.
That's such a good point, though. That is so unavoidably true. If someone's willing you to pay you that much money for that thing, you don't need that money.
Yeah, right.
You're probably making money from other things.
Money from other things. That's why they're willing to pay you. They want to learn what you know, right? And I mean, unless you're just a really good bullshitter. And also, it might hurt your personal life. Speaking at another entrepreneur event, fitness event, whatever it is, I don't think does that much for the greater good in relation to the amount of time and effort it requires. But you might choose to take an afternoon to volunteer and speak at a local college class, which I've done multiple times. I've spoken to more college classes than I've spoken at events in the last number of years. And I definitely don't get paid to speak at college classes. None of them have any money.
Right.
Unless you're like have an endowment fund with $50 billion or something like that. I find it so funny that schools like Harvard makes something like $5 billion in just interest on their investments alone every year. And they're tax exempt. And they send money to alumni asking for donations.
Right.
It's the biggest sham in the world. I want that business.
Right.
It's wonderful.
Generally speaking, it's quite the hustle.
Oh my God.
Higher education for profit is quite the hustle.
You know what? You know what's interesting though about Harvard more than, I mean, the endowment fund is just fucking batshit bonkers.
Right.
But and the fact that they have so many tax grants and stuff also. But you know, one of the ways that Harvard has this publishing arm that does hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and it's not Harvard Business Review or anything like that. You know what makes the most amount of money?
No.
They license case studies.
Oh, really?
They'll produce like a case study on Airbnb or whatever it is, and thousands of colleges will buy a copy at whatever it is, $10 a pop for every single business student.
Sheesh.
It's a crazy business. Crazy business. And all because they have the name Harvard. Like anybody could write this case study. Like I've bought some of them. You can just buy some of them. I bought some of them. I read it. I'm like, what is this? Like, this is not all that useful. Like, cool. Airbnb, I get it. Like they built a code to basically hack Craigslist and send, like, this is how Airbnb basically started, was they needed to get people to list their stuff on Airbnb, and people were listing rentals already on Craigslist. And so they basically built a code to hack Craigslist and sent an inquiry to every single one of them with a piece of code that effectively said, hey, you could get more money if you listed your place here.
Right.
Like, okay, cool. So I can like hack somebody else's website, like kind of illegally. That's what I learned from that case study. But, well, I mean, it wasn't quite illegal, but like it was very much a gray area. Anyway, Harvard, that's like, I can't remember what it is. I think beyond their endowment fund, that's like their second biggest source of revenue. It's not students. It's not anything else. It's crazy. Okay. Number 8.
Unbelievable. No, I got nothing. Move on.
Number 8. Have I considered the worst case scenario? We've spoken about this one a little bit. I won't dwell on it. All that I'll say is that the philosopher Seneca once said that if you wish to stave off all fear, imagine that the worst that can happen most certainly will happen. Fear, if you're scared about something, understand that fear is an irrational response to the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to overcome fear, the best way to do that is by considering the worst case scenario, is actually making the unknown known. Because when you do that, you'll often realize that what you fear, A, isn't likely going to happen. Or even if it does happen, you've at least identified it and it'll be like, well, that's not that bad. Or maybe it really is that bad. And you're like, cool, my fear is warranted. I'm not doing this thing.
Right.
Either way now, you've made a decision. And that's a very freeing thing to do.
That's the biggest part of everything, though, is to make the decision. Nearly everything that you want to have happen in every area of your life is not going to happen through deep introspective thought. You're going to take an action. It's going to suck or it's going to be awesome. If it sucks, you're going to learn a different action to take. If it's awesome, you crack the code, repeat it. Doesn't get more complicated than that. It's interesting because Seneca is also the person that said we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. So it's this interesting sort of dichotomy of those two. You imagine the worst, but also realize that most of what's going on is going on in your head is never going to happen.
Well, but I think the point that he was saying with that quote, isn't it, that like you actually shouldn't imagine.
Right.
You should make it known.
Right. Right.
Because when we imagine things, when we don't quite understand things, I used to think, and I still think actually, fear is this emotion that is so irrational. And I did a deep dive into it a couple years back because I was like, I feel like this is kind of the new frontier. Like if I ever want to write a social science book, which I probably won't, but like a Malcolm Gladwell-esque book, I think the next batch of those that are going to come out are going to start to be around fear and taking action and things like that. But I think they're actually going to be around fear. Because fear makes no sense.
Right.
You can't, if I were to ask you, if you're like, oh, I don't know if I should do this thing, I'm like, why not? Oh, I'm nervous. Why are you nervous? Oh, like, I just don't know if I should do it. Yeah, why is that? Like, you can't actually put it into words.
Right.
And neither can I. This is not like me saying you, like you.
Right.
This is just like, we can't put it into words. It's this weird thing where when we imagine things or when things are unknown, we worry about it because of how uncomfortable things that we don't know are.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to overcome that is just to write it down, man. Oh, cool. Are they all going to laugh at me? Maybe. Is that so bad? Can I take that? No, I can't take that. All right, I'm not doing this.
Right, don't do it.
Boom. Done. Move on. Do something where you don't put yourself in the spotlight. Or figure out a way to get over it. They're both fine. But make a decision. That's John, the self-help guru, for today.
Good job, John. It's well
okay.
done.
Have I interviewed the available person who knows what I want to learn? So, the first step in knowledge acquisition is to break down whatever problem you're trying to solve into its parts. This is a key to how I learn. So when I read, there's two different ways that I read. One of them is just general knowledge accumulation. Like, it's just like a subject I decide I'm interested in. I mean, there's fiction, but I'm talking nonfiction reading. Right? There's just like a general topic that I'm kind of interested in, and I'm just going to read whatever's interesting about that thing. The second way that I'm going to read, though, is if there's a problem that I'm trying to solve. I'll look for resources in that. But before I do, I'll determine which parts of the problem I know how to do and I'm confident in, and then I'll make a list of all of the aspects that are gaps in my knowledge. And then from there, I'll seek out the person or the resource who best can fill in those gaps. And that might mean calling somebody who's an expert and actually asking them good, very targeted questions. Or in a Facebook group. How many good questions do you see in Facebook groups? They're just like, somebody's like, how do I get clients? It's like, nah, man, like, you got to do better than that. Like, nothing you get is going to be helpful.
Right.
And
questions are the answers, though.
Questions are the answers. Right? And there are gaps in knowledge is fine as long as you identify those gaps in knowledge. So that's the whole point. Because then you can ask a better question. But also then, if I'm going through a book or something like that, and this is why I'm reading, I'll blast through that book. I mean, I will flip through that book super fast, and I'll try to zero in on that gap in knowledge. And spend time on that. And then I'll blast through and try to figure out how that's done. I don't think that you should hire a coach or mentor unless you have a pretty firm and very specific understanding of what you want to gain from them. I don't actually, like, I think it's up to you to kind of figure out what you want to do when you grow up. And then you go to an expert who's already done that thing, who can help you through all the pitfalls and avoid the mistakes that they've made. I think that that's valuable. But there's a lot of people who hire coaches to like give them the most basic bits of information. I designed the Online Trainer Academy to use technology to deliver all those basic bits of information. Because you don't need a coach to talk to you about that. Whereas these other programs charge thousands more. And basically what they're doing is they're just telling you how to set up like your social media account. It's not something you need to pay somebody to tell you how to do. So have I interviewed the available person who knows what I want to learn? And there's an extension to this that I'm becoming more familiar with now. And it has to do with hiring and stuff, which we're going to talk about in another episode, I think, Glenn, pretty soon.
Yeah.
But there's a story that I just heard on a podcast called Big Shot, which our buddy Adam Bornstein actually produces. But basically what they're doing is it's these two guys that are doing really in-depth interviews with like the great Jewish entrepreneurs before they die. And so they're
Wow.
often with these like 90-year-old billionaires. Super interesting. So there's one, there's a part one and a part two. The part two isn't out yet, but it probably is when this podcast will come out. And it is the founder of the Four Seasons Hotel, whose name is Isidore Izzy. And he's a Jewish entrepreneur from Toronto. Like the Four Seasons started in Toronto. And so the Four Seasons Hotel has over 41,000 employees. And they're ranked always basically in the top 100 on the Fortune, on the Fortune list of the best places to work. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. I want to tell you how Izzy found his first ever employee. He was looking for a manager of his first ever hotel. This is in the 1960s. And he went to another hotel in the city that was like the hip hotel. And he went to the general manager of the hotel. And he said, hey, I'm Izzy. Look, I've got a place like this. And I'm not asking for you, I'm looking for a general manager. I'm wondering if you know anybody who might be a good fit. And the guy introduced him to somebody named Ian Munro, who was his first ever hire. And he's like, I didn't know how to interview or hire people. He seemed good. So I brought him on. And this guy, Ian Munro, I actually looked up, unfortunately died of a heart attack like in his 50s in the 1970s. But he was one of the founding members of the Four Seasons Hotel. Like he was a major part in growing this empire. And so think about what Izzy did, right? He didn't put out he didn't put up job postings on polls. He didn't put out job postings on the equivalent of LinkedIn being like, I'm looking for a general manager of the hotel. He went to the place where the odds were good that somebody already knew how to do what he needed to get done and was already actively doing that really well. He went to the best operated hotel in the city and he was like, yeah, do you know anybody else like you? Because people who do something often know other people who also do that thing. Mm-hmm. So that's another kind of extension of this. And I've got stories of that. I'm actually hiring for somebody right now, and I did that exact same thing. And I've got a couple candidates who are stellar. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that in another episode. Two more. Should I keep moving forward?
Yeah, cool. Keep moving.
Okay, number 10. Will this change anything that I do? I think that over-rationalizing right brain dominance, paying way too much attention to data that you can acquire, insights that are shoved in your face, I think it's a plague in today's business environment. I think we have too much data. I think we have too many stats, and I think it paralyzes us. I think when you're contemplating whether acquiring more data, ask if it will change anything that you do based off of the result. And if not, don't bother it to the point where don't even look at it, ignore it. More often than not, you don't actually need to know one more thing. Mm-hmm. You're just procrastinating. Mm-hmm. Amber asked me the episode that went live today, which was episode... what was the episode that went live today? Episode 82, 4 Ways to Succeed When You're on Your Own. She asked me about, because I spoke on that episode pretty early on about how I just have never looked at stats for anything I've ever done. I've never looked at book sales. I never looked at website visitor stats, anything. Like literally, like we had to send to a potential sponsor for the podcast. We had to send like podcast download stats. I said to Amber, I'm like, hey, yeah, give them whatever they need, but don't CC me on the email. I don't want to see it.
Right.
And she said, how do you think that's affected you? And what I said is that I think it's focused me on what really matters. I think it's focused me on the quality of the product because it wouldn't change anything that I do. I think that it's a lot of short-term thinking, or worse, particularly if the insights of the data that you see, I'm thinking like social media data, it's how to build a better social media platform. It's not how to use social media to build a better business.
Right.
The data that Instagram sends you is data that Instagram gives you so that you can do better on Instagram. It's not how you can better use Instagram for most of the reasons why you're using Instagram, which is to gather an audience or a platform or interest into something you're doing that is not trying to become famous on Instagram. And so it's actually a distraction.
Right.
And it can send you down the wrong path of focusing far too much on things like viral hits and how do I get the most bullshit engagement versus how to really build. Like what the examples that we gave, Len, of the messages that I sent to those two folks, like that's not going to show up anywhere ever.
Never. Not on Instagram. You're not going to get a reward for that from the system. No. Not at all.
But this gym that I spoke to, Sam, who's the gym owner, whose staff member sent Sam, I don't know if Sam is a man or a woman, or they, I don't know. Yeah, but I'll just say Sam, I'll say they. So I don't know. Trainer sent a gym owner a post of mine. The gym owner had never heard of me. The gym owner probably has more than one trainer.
Right.
The gym owner and I now have a relationship.
Right.
The odds that gym owner, now that gym follows me, the odds that gym owner is now going to speak positively about me at some point in some way to multiple staff members of that gym.
Right.
That ain't going to show in an insight, is it?
No. It's the ripple effect. It's a pebble in a pond or a pebble in a large lake, but it has an effect. A pond. Just
there's a ring to that.
Wee pebble in a pond. But I see the ramifications of this particular question, this filter, so often because we have I don't know if it's a social media thing because we're in that era, but we have a tendency to turn measures into goals, right? Your goal is to feel loved as a client, but then you directly correlate that to your weight. The measure is, and then the measure becomes a goal, right? I've got to get down to 215. I've got to get down to 165. Well, that's not the actual goal. You've turned the measure into the goal. Your goal is to get clients, build a thriving online business. And then you get fixated on how many likes I have, how many followers. Well, that's a measure that might lead to the goal, but that's not the goal. That Goodhart's law, when a measure becomes a goal, it ceases to be a good measure. I see that so often everywhere in all of our business on the consumer side and the business side. And it's nauseating to me because you're taking things that are meant to give you indicators along the route and you're making them destinations and they were never meant to be destinations.
So here's a problem that I always have with that. And it's funny because this came up on a brainstorming session early this week.
Really?
We had all the mentors together for the Online Trainer Mentorship, our higher level program. And we just got together on a brainstorming session. We're like, hey, our program is phenomenal, but like,
it is.
Let's talk about how we can make it even better. And one of the things that we say is there's quantitative measures for entering in the program. So you have to be making a minimum of $1,000 a month to enter in the program online. But really, like, we'll take people up to $20,000 or $30,000 a month as their starting point, and then we'll grow them from there. And then there's promises of, you're going to make you're going to make at least $15,000 more over the 12 weeks you're in the program, or we'll work with you until you make that back. But it's not really about $15,000, is it? And that's the problem. We have people who will make $100,000. Like, it's not really about the money. And the minute that somebody enters in the program, our coaches do a very good job of saying, okay, cool. Like, all right, so why did you join us?
Right.
Oh, I really want to be able to buy a house. Oh, we're thinking of having a baby and I don't want to be gone all the time. Like it's very quick but we can't market those things necessarily. We can use so that statements. But oftentimes in marketing, you do need to meet people where they're at, and you need to speak very simply and very succinctly, which largely has to be done. I say unfortunately, I think that's true, using numbers, using things that all of us measures that people can really quickly understand. But the second that you get somebody and you start talking to them, figure out what that means.
Yes.
You figure out what that means. And then the rest of your coaching needs to transition and say, all right, cool. What do you need for that down payment?
Right.
What do you need for that mortgage? What amount are you going to feel secure? All right, that's the goal, right? Like that.
Right.
If it's like for us, then we're talking about that. So I do struggle with that.
I do too. And I'm happy to hear you say that you struggle with it on the level that you're doing business, because I'm a business to consumer, I'm B2C, but I find myself struggling with that all the time because I know too much to have deep belief in that measure, but I also know too much to think that I need to try to educate the potential buyer through the messaging of getting them to enroll. That's another that's a death stroke, right? So I try to utilize it as a Trojan horse, right?
Wow.
I just need to get in the gate. Once I get in the gate, I open the horse, and then I let out the transformative language of getting you past that measure to identifying what actually is the problem. The problem is that you don't think that your husband wants to be intimate with you. I get it now. The problem wasn't 15 pounds exactly. I understand. And the best thing that I can see happen is at the end of a process, the clients say, I love this program. It helped me so much. By the time I got to the end, I wasn't ever even really concerned with hitting that weight. Then I know we properly transitioned from the measure that they understood to the goal that they couldn't dig it up. They don't have the skill to dig that big thing up. So it's very hopeful for me to hear you say that. And I'm going to be quiet now.
Before I get to the last point, number 11, I'm going to talk about my favorite clothing company for a moment.
Do it, John.
Unbound Merino. They're the sponsors of this podcast. I love the clothes. I'm wearing their shirt. I think I've worn the shirt in every recording that we've done of this podcast all the way through. They make the best t-shirts I've ever worn. I have 12 of them in different colors. It's my one shirt. And so I recommend you check them out. Merino wool is the most comfortable, doesn't smell, looks great. It's the best material that I've come across. I loved it before this company even came about. But it was always super ugly and like travel clothes before, and this company made it look really good. So Unbound Merino, there's a link in our bio, and you get 10% off your first order with coupon code Goodman. I think that's it. All right, number 11, final one. Will it hurt me to throw this away? I never realized how easy it was to collect clutter until I bought a house. Dude, stuff just collects. Oh, we might use this at one point. All of a sudden, I look down in our basement. I'm like, what is all this shit, man? We got all these boxes. Like, you got to eliminate clutter. Stuff's a distraction. To think clearly, to make good decisions, to keep your focus, eliminate everything that's not useful. Those are calendar events as well. When you agree to do something new, you very rarely say, okay, that means I'm not doing this other thing, and you remove that from your life. The way to be productive, productivity, time management, everybody thinks it's some app. Productivity has nothing to do with some fucking note-taking app. It's subtraction, not addition. You don't need another tool to help you make better lists to do more shit. All you're doing is you're just delaying the inevitable overwhelm. It's subtraction. And so my process for this, because I can't do it in the moment, my process for this is twice a year, I wipe my slate clean. Now, you might not be able to do it to the extent that I do it, because you might have meetings and commitments and stuff that you have to continue doing. But twice a year, what I do is I actually wipe my entire calendar clean, and I start from scratch. And I reprioritize everything that I do, from podcast recordings to writing time to whatever it is. And I enter that stuff back into my calendar as if it never existed before, with an initial prioritization sequence. And the amount of things I look at where I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore.
Nope.
Works really well. Now, the issue when you own a house is that you have a wife that justifiably wants to be involved in the decision. Right. And so sometimes you need to just make a note. It's like, oh, honey, I'm throwing out this shirt of mine that you don't like, that's ripped, that I find super comfortable. Maybe you want to throw out your super ugly shirt too. you can kind of. I've had to play some games like that. She still hasn't thrown out the shirt. It's like, baby, you got that shirt 8 years ago when we were in Hawaii when you were pregnant, and you had to cut it in 3 different places.
Oh my gosh!
And it's so ratty and so nasty. Why do you keep wearing that? It's just I threw out mine. And my shirt was a Run DMC shirt, which was obviously super cool.
Yeah, it's a very cool shirt, John.
It is a very cool shirt. Anyway, that's the 11 filters. I hope that you like this 2-part series. I feel like we had some good conversations on some of these. And I feel like, Amber really pulls it together.
She does.
Yeah, we need her.
And the audience doesn't know this unless you watch on YouTube the episodes, but sometimes she's just pulling it together with a look. It's just a side eye that shuts everybody down. We just know to shut the fuck up right there. And we haven't had that the last 2 episodes. So
okay, for all the Jews listening here, you'll understand this. I grew up with a Jewish mother. Loving. I love my mom. I saw her this morning. I see her almost every day. Jewish mothers are very, very good at what's the right word for it? Silent guilt. It's incredibly effective. And if you also had a Jewish mother, shalom, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Amber provides that service for us here. It keeps you in line. So Amber, we miss you. We can't wait to have you back next episode. Thank you for the picture of how to end the podcast. Oh wait, I need to recommend one. Oh shoot. Oh my God.
You look, John. So
I know.
If you didn't listen to the last episode, Amber wrote a diagram with an arrow pointing to the button that John's meant to push to start and stop the podcast. A day ago, we recorded the first one. Today, he referenced the image again because he couldn't remember from yesterday what button the arrow pointed to. Yes. So he's referenced it twice.
The image which had a big red arrow to the one button that said begin recording.
So sweet.
We need you, Amber. We need you so badly. Don't ever take time off again. Okay. If you're looking for another episode to listen to on the Obvious Choice podcast, which apparently was conceptualized in 2017, I just figured out, then I'm going to recommend you listen to episode 51. This episode is called Why Goal Setting Leads to Disaster. And I bring that up because Wen talked a lot about, measures and what was
measures
the
and goals.
Yeah. Measures and goals. And it's a lot about that. It doesn't use that language, but it talks about process goals. It talks about how I'm a personal trainer and I hate goal setting. And I've never really liked goal setting. I've written articles about why I don't like goal setting as far back as 2012. Mm-hmm. And so talks a lot about that. So episode 51, Why Goal Setting Leads to Disaster. And as always, I'm here with Wen Cell Jones. I'm Jonathan Goodman. Thanks for hanging out with us.